Transition Team by Charles Sheffield. Originally published in the premiere issue of Destinies, which calls itself a magazine but was always thick enough to also be termed an anthology, in October 1978. It was republished in Jerry Pournelle's Endless Frontier anthology and a collection of the author's stories called Vectors, both in 1979. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel Quasar Spectra. Transition Team. Thomas Pringle, Department of Internal Security, L5 Colony. Dear Tom, I'm sending you under separate transmission a bunch of references on the question of critical phenomena in biological systems. Without more details from you, they are the best answer I can offer to your question about the relevance of critical mass in group behavioral patterns. A better term, by the way, would be critical times. There are lots of examples of those in complex organisms. Major changes of state often occur abruptly in a particular well-defined period. Examples: birth, death, metamorphosis. Now stop screwing around and tell me what's happening up there. All the reports back here tell us everything is going marvelously. Are we getting a snow job? I can't tell you how pleased I was to hear from you. It's been a long time. Love, Beth. Professor Elizabeth S. Lockwood, Department of Behavioral Sciences, Stanford University, Stanford, California. Dear Beth, Jose Villas promised to get this package to you without opening it or telling anybody about it. He wouldn't even tell me how he'd get in through decontamination and customs. You aren't getting a snow job. So far as all the usual indicators go, this colony is operating exactly as planned. Better than planned. We've had 20% fewer fatalities than we projected, and the mortality rate for newborns is down to less than 1 in 3. The first spaceborns are reaching puberty a little ahead of schedule. What we didn't anticipate, a pleasant surprise, was the earlier maturity in intelligence. The spaceborns are running out at an average IQ of over 140, Earth norm. We think that's due to the general speeding up of development, and the adult IQs should level off at an average of about 120. We started with good stock. Anyway, by any of the standard measures, including all those that we send back to Earth in the colony progress descriptions, we are in great shape here. What alarms me is a couple of non-standard indicators. Take a look at this batch of school reports and tell me what you think. I've arranged for you to receive the originals rather than data stream copies because I assume that you are still a nut on handwriting analysis. Should I be worried, or am I just getting paranoid? You are quite right. 10 years is far too long. I look in the mirror now and wonder what happened to the hair you used to run your fingers through. Love, Tom. Dear Tom, you do have a problem, a big one. Send me all the information you have on the physical description of the spaceborns, as up-to-date as possible. Also, send me details on the mating habits of all children on L5 between ages of 9 and 14. Also, tell me how I can get medical records for Skylab, shuttle, and space tug crews. Send soon. Love, Beth. Elizabeth S. Lockwood. I am arriving space tug Flight 14D. Don't go anywhere next 4 days. Need update you on facts. Hear your ideas. Thomas Pringle, June 6th, 16. This is just a sample, Tom. Are many of the others like this? I waved down at the sheaf of papers sitting in my lap and looked again at the sprawling, unformed calligraphy of the top sheet. Mostly, said Tom. I sent you one report from each grade. A lot of the others read like that. I picked out the most literate and easiest to follow. Do you need more, Beth? He was sprawled on my redwood frame settee, briefcase and travel case open beside him. Outside the Portola Valley sunset was a glare of fuming brown and red. The hydrocarbons were bad tonight. Tom was looking out there in horror and disgust. I had grown used to it, but I couldn't deny it had grown worse in the past 10 years. When had I last dared to sit out on the porch? Tom looked tired, handsome as ever, but bowed down by the unfamiliar weight. Even though I knew it was the effects of the L5 environment, I couldn't get over his appearance. He still had the lean, lightly muscled body of a 22-year-old. He was right, though, about his hair. It was receding off the temples and creating a sandy widow's peak. I was suddenly super-conscious of my own encroaching wrinkles and crow's feet, the sagging, real or imagined, of my breasts and the slow betrayal of my knees. Nor, for the first time, I took a complete survey of myself, from the top of my head, signs of gray at the crown, to my feet. Still doing fine. Odd behavior from a behavioral scientist? Unfortunately, no. Physician, heal thyself. I don't need any more than you sent me to tell that things aren't right, I said. When a first grader answers the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? With, I want to be a real person, my hair starts to stand on end. Did you read that sixth grader's end-of-term project for yourself? The history of the L5 colony? It came across as a dirge of mistrust and betrayal. Why do you think that I said it to you, Beth? Look, there are other things that I didn't want to say until I saw you in person. There have been 6 deaths in the post-puberty group. They were up near the colony hub, and they might, just conceivably, have all been accidents, but I doubt it. That would be too much of a coincidence. Beth, all this seems to have happened so quickly. It looks that way, but I want to see some of the older school reports. There may be patterns that can only be seen with hindsight. I'll have the old stuff pulled and take a look as soon as I get back. What on earth made you ask about the dating patterns of the spaceborns? When I saw that in your last message, I decided I'd better get down here quickly. I'd hoped you wanted to see my baby blue eyes again, I said coyly. Then I winced inside. I hadn't carried that off at all well. It was supposed to sound light and humorous. Instead, it came across as a statement of fact. Tom, I hurried on, when kids are self-hating or self-doubting, their loving goes off balance too. I didn't believe that the children who wrote those reports could have normal dating patterns. What are they doing up there? He rubbed his eyes wearily. I wondered what crazy diurnal rhythm he was on. As I recalled it, the L5 colony kept Greenwich Civil Time. The spaceborns don't date, he said at last. At least if they do, it's nowhere where we can observe it. They've developed past puberty, physically, but they aren't going in for any of the usual courtship rituals. Is that the right phrase? They just don't do it. What do they do instead? They must do something with their free time. Tom knuckled at his eyes again. It must be well past midnight for his biological clock. They spend lots of time in the low-gravity sections, in by the hub, he said. We don't monitor them there. Privacy is very important in the colony, but I'm sure they never flirt or make passes when they're with the rest of us in the outer sections. He leaned forward and put his hand on my knee. Look, Beth, that's the real reason I came to see you. Will you go back with me and take a look at what's going on? I'm sure we've missed something basic. To the colony? Tom, I'm flattered. Tremendously flattered, but don't you have your own specialists up there? Quite a few, but none of them is Elizabeth Lockwood. He looked at me sadly, and I suddenly thought back to the first time we had met. Beth, we need a head start, he said desperately. People down here will find out eventually, but we don't want to say we're in trouble until we have a solution. There are enough jackasses in the government talking about the waste of funds for the colony. What better use can they suggest for money? More war or more welfare? Tom, what time is it? The non sequitur knocked him off balance. He looked at his watch. 3 a.m., according to me. Why do you ask? You're running down. Time change, plus the higher gravity. You need rest. The tyranny of the clock. You're right. I'm wilting. He grimaced at me, then winked. Fair nature's eye, rise, rise again, and make perpetual day. We have that perpetual day, Beth, up in L5, apart from an occasional eclipse. I flew back again over 14 years. Tom had been reminded of our first meeting, too. We had been at the University Dramatic Society for a rehearsal of The Tragical History of Dr. Faustus. Through the next 4 years, our inside language had drawn from Marlowe and Shakespeare. I suddenly felt awkward and uncomfortable. Our reunion had been wonderful so far, but the next step wouldn't be easy. There was no way to unmake the past or step back through a 10-year gulf. In the old days, I would have said something like, "Lovers, to bed, 'tis almost fairy time." And Tom would have replied, "Sweet Helen, make me immortal with a kiss." That wouldn't work anymore. We had changed, and although Tom still looked the same, things wouldn't be easy. I felt the joy of an old wound waking. Tom saved the day. He passed out. Not completely, but near enough so that the only question I had to answer was whether or not I should try and remove his shoes. I did, dimmed the lights, and went for a blanket to cover him. I had already answered Tom's question. He had devoted his working life to the colony. There was no way I could refuse to help him in the struggle. I would tell him when he awoke, which would be quite a while by the look of him. I would have liked to spend the time to the L5 colony, studying the children's reports in more detail, but the distractions were too great. First, there was Tom, sitting beside me, thin and etiolated as dahlia tubers that germinated too early in my cellar. I guessed that he had lost 50% or more of his muscle structure through living so long in low G. Then there was the space tug itself, spiraling lazily away from parking orbit and lofting us out to the Liberation Point colony. At the halfway mark, I had the chance to look out of the viewing port for the first time. Earth was a giant blue-white half-moon, occulting 4 or 5 degrees of the bright star field. I tried to imagine myself as a spaceborne child, never knowing anything more of Earth than the abstraction of a mottled ball in the sky. I couldn't make the switch in viewpoint. I understood now why the education schedule for spaceborne children included a couple of years of finishing school back on Earth. The colony itself remained invisible for the whole trip. By the time we were near enough to see it, the angle ahead was too narrow for it to be visible through the side-facing ports. My first sighting was of the central hub, moving past the port just a few yards from my eyes as the tug moved to a docking with the stationary spindle of the big cylinder. It was a disappointment. I had imagined us swimming slowly up to the colony, seeing it steadily growing through the viewports. It occurred to me that the frequent television shots of such a docking must either be a simulation or a view from a non-standard tug with extra and functionally unnecessary forward-looking ports. "We're here," said Tom as there was a final bump of the docking. "Let's get you cleared through disease control. Then I expect you're ready for a rest." "I'm all right." I suddenly realized I really was all right and smiled. "You know, I think I actually like free fall. I thought it was supposed to make me feel all sick." "It varies with the individual. I've known people who were sick the whole time they were in low G. We even had to ship a few of them back, or they would have died. You seem to be one of the lucky ones. Anyway, you'll have your sleeping quarters on the outer rim. Gravity there is almost a fifth of a G." "Gravity?" "Oh, don't be a pedant. Centrifugal force, if you prefer to call it that. Work it out for yourself. The colony has a radius of 300 meters, and it turns once every 80 seconds. You'll feel almost as light on the outer rim as you would on the moon. It's less now than it used to be. I can remember when we had 1 revolution a minute. Mind you, if the spaceborns had their way, we'd be slowing the spin a lot further than that. There it was again, nagging away at the edge of my attention. This time I caught it. Tom always seemed to refer to the spaceborns, never to the kids or children. But all the children on the L5 colony had been born in space. There had been neither incentive nor equipment to ship infants up from Earth. I tucked the odd fact away in my mental files, the files that Tom had joshed me on so much in our student days. Was it my fault if I didn't forget things? People who envied me never knew how much misery it had caused me. Tom was looking at me alertly. He hadn't lost his old knack of reading a lot of my thoughts from my face. "Anything you want to do before the sleep period?" he asked. "I'd like to show you around here, then get in my session in the exercise room." "Today? Surely you don't need to exercise now." "Every day, sick or healthy. You want to do it, too, while you're here. It's voluntary, of course, but didn't you read the Sky Lab and Space Lab reports that you asked for? The medical records?" "I've read bits of them. I wanted to see how accurately your student had reported the reality in her term paper. She did a good job." "If you read past the cover, you know that there's a rapid calcium loss unless you exercise hard and have adequate gravity. About 1/7 of a G seems to be enough. Lucky thing, or we'd have real problems with the lunar bases. You don't need to worry about the exercise much because you won't be here more than a week or two. But I daren't skip my own conditioning." As we spoke, the final docking had been completed and the hatches opened. The air smelled odd, as though there were clumps of rotting seaweed not too far away. It was tolerable enough, but I suspected that the hydroponic systems needed a little fine-tuning. The decontamination process turned out to be long and tedious. We were sprayed and irradiated, stark naked in zero-G, with a fine variety of liquids and colored lights. There was no time to complain about loss of dignity when we emerged. We were whisked out, pronounced suitably sterile, and issued colony clothing. I looked at mine with distaste. "You don't dress for sex appeal here, do you, Tom?" He shrugged. "Dress is optional. Quite a few people prefer to go without. Most of the rest make their own. We've had a devil of a time getting the spaceborns to wear anything at all when they're not in formal training sessions. We have good temperature control all over the colony, so clothing is all a matter of taste anyway." We set off along a long corridor, a gentle spiral that turned steadily out from the central hub towards the outer living quarters. We proceeded by a combination of walking, drifting, and falling. It was slightly downhill all the way. After a few minutes, I began to feel a bit disoriented. I stopped, and the feeling left me. Tom looked at me and laughed. "Sorry, Beth. I should have warned you. There's a slight gravity gradient, a change in effective gravity, as we move out. If you don't like it, we can slow down." "It's all right," I said, "now that I know what it is. Tom, why does the corridor spiral round like this instead of going straight out like a spoke?" "Some of the corridors are straight," he said. "I picked this one to help you get your space legs." I stood still, turned, and looked at him. "Oh, all right," he said. "Damn it, Beth, I forgot about your built-in lie detector. We always bring people this way, the first time on the colony. We try and impress them with the size of it. I did it out of habit. It's a 4-kilometer trip this way before we get to the outer rim. I am impressed. No wonder it took 15 years to build this. It would have taken twice that long if Bjorling hadn't discovered the superficial metal deposits on the moon. The whole project is 10 years ahead of schedule. We could start work on the second colony, the big one, tomorrow if we had the funds." There was a defensive tone in his voice, inevitable perhaps for one who had spent so many years of his life developing and defending a colony whose existence came up for constant questioning in government budget circles. Think you'll get money for that second colony, Tom? I said. I was sorry I had asked before the words were all spoken. His shrug was loose-jointed, a rippling movement that he could never have managed back on Earth. We have to get it, Beth, he said. This is the future out here. There's no way that we'll go back to the mess down there. 9 billion in the madhouse and more every second. That's one reason I came and asked your help. We've made space our home. No matter what the problem is here with the Spaceborns, we have to lick it and keep the momentum going for the second colony. You won't have much time, Tom, if there are any more deaths, particularly if you get one that's definitely a suicide. I know. His voice was bleak. Ahead of us, the white fluorescent lights that ran the length of the corridor broke to a blue rectangular pattern. Tom pointed to it. There's the exit to the outer rim. How are you feeling? If you still have enough energy for a couple of quick introductions, I'd like you to meet the head of the education department, Theo Hendon. Are you up to it? Let's not waste any time. I'm ready to meet people now. Tom sounded more tired than I did, but if he could take it, I could. I squeezed his arm, thinner now than my own, and we went on into the living quarters and set around the perimeter of the cylinder. I had expected to see some of the spaceborne children in the quarters when we emerged. After all, they made up more than half of the colony's 3,000 people. There were many people in the corridors, but no sign of any children. They prefer their own choice of recreation habitat, said Tom in answer to my question. We try to get them to stay here, but we don't have time or people to keep track of them all the time. They have their own lifestyle preferences, and we only apply the discipline for key things like diet and education. We might have been inside a large office building back on Earth, except for the low gravity and the inevitable slight curve of all the floors and ceilings. The latter were white, about 8 feet high, and the walls were pleasant shades of buff, green, and ivory. There was none of the sterile or metallic impression that some Earth people had spoken of as the main ingredient of L5 decor. Naturally, there was no wood, but the color and shaping of the metals and plastics had been done skillfully to give a feeling of grain and variable texture. I liked it, and Tom was obviously pleased by my reaction. Theo Hendon, head of education, was reviewing course material when we reached his quarters. One look at him told me how lucky Tom had been. Naturally lean and angular, Tom had become even thinner from loss of muscle in the L5 environment. They had countered the natural tendency to fill out with increasing years and made him look youthful and attractive by Earth standards. Theo Hendon was much more an endomorph. He had swelled in bulk while losing both muscle and bone structure, and looked like a big fat blob. There, I felt, was one man who skimped badly on his exercise sessions. I resolutely tried to leave Earth ideals of beauty behind me as we entered. "Fourth grade history and geography," Hendon said after the introductions were over. "Lena Bartels teaches it, and you'll meet her tomorrow. But maybe you'd like to have a look at the course material now, unless you're feeling too tired." His manner was friendly, but he couldn't disguise his worry and nervousness. I already knew that he was one of the people that I'd have to be extra nice to, since it was his area of responsibility that had first triggered Tom's worries and brought me up to L5. I think I managed to put him fully at ease in about 5 minutes. A behavioral scientist who can't make people accept her is like an insolvent economist, inexcusable. "I'd like to see the courses," I said to Hendon. "But more than that, I'd like to see a few of the children. Where are their living quarters and play areas? I'd like to see those before I see the children in school tomorrow. That may be more important than looking at the written material. I already saw a fair amount before I came here." The two men looked at each other. "I'll take her," said Tom after a moment. He turned to me. We set up the living quarters for the spaceborns on the outer rim, along with the rest of us, but they have access to all of the colony, except for the power and utility sections, and they seem to prefer their own choice for recreation, in towards the hub. They've taken over an empty storage section there and converted it to a sort of maze. I won't try and describe it. You'll have to see it for yourself. But it means another walk, uphill this time, before the sleep period. While he was speaking, he looked at me with a certain familiar expression. I felt warm inside. We had been increasingly at ease with each other since we left Stanford, and now the last reserve was gone. I smiled back at him. "I'm not fatigued, Tom," I said, "but I am sleepy. I spent most of the night before we left rearranging my teaching schedule. Let's wait until tomorrow." "Sure. I forgot that you have those mighty earth-trained muscles. You could carry me up to the hub, I'll bet, and not notice the effort. But let it wait a few hours, and you'll feel more alert when you do take a look around." Theo Hendon nodded his agreement. He had, not surprisingly, missed all the second level of communication between us, and he didn't seem to notice that I had suddenly and inexplicably changed my priorities completely. Irresponsible on my part, to put pleasure before professional work? Sure, but as I get older, carpe diem gets more and more reasonable as a motto for life. Tom wanted to show me that his physical collapse in the soupy air and full earth gravity of Pournelle Valley was irrelevant in the airy palaces of Laputa. I wanted to help him do it. The classroom looked conventional enough, even though the furniture was thin and insubstantial by Earth standards. We had gone to a good deal of trouble to find me a hiding place behind a wall projector panel where I could see and hear without being seen. I didn't want to induce atypical behavior in either teacher or students. It had taken me a while to persuade Theo Hendon that I was not really spying on Lena Bartels, but he had finally agreed that there was no way of guaranteeing normal behavior on her part if she suspected that she had a hidden witness. I was in position early, well before the lesson began. Soon after I had settled myself, the first child floated in through the classroom doorway and made her way to the front row of the fixed benches. She was about 9 years old, dressed in a brief daffodil yellow costume like a loose one-piece bathing suit. The frequent television and film coverage from L5 couldn't do justice to the reality. The long skeletal limbs were the same. So was the delicate-looking, eggshell-thin skull, with its thin-boned features and sparse covering of fine hair. The factor that the cameras failed to catch at all was the unworldly grace of movement. When the spaceborne moved, I realized how clumsy Tom and his colleagues were in low gravity. As the child moved, all of her moved. There was a curious symmetry to the motion, an overall balance that was pleasing to the eye, while apparently functionally unnecessary, except that my experience has taught me that there is no such thing as unnecessary behavior. I had no idea of the child's name, but in my mind she was Cobweb, Moth, Mustard Seed. I found out the basis for that graceful symmetry later, but while I was still puzzling and admiring, the rest of the children began to arrive. Lena Bartels came in last. By contrast, her movements, though they were economical and practiced in low gravity, appeared crude and awkward. She came to the front of the room, checked the class roster just as though it were any schoolroom back on Earth, and began the lesson. No one ever approaches a problem with a completely open mind. I had read the reports that the children had written, and deep inside me I had blamed the teachers. Only biased and malicious indoctrination, I felt, could lead to such alienation, such misery in the children's work. I hadn't sensed that bias in Tom or in Theo Hendon, so subconsciously I expected it to show up in the teachers who had most of the actual classroom contact. It wasn't there. Lena Bartels was kind, competent, and sympathetic. Some of the children seemed restless, wriggling in their seats while she presented the lesson to them, but I could find no fault with the material, either in the facts or in the manner of its presentation. The facts of history were given clearly, without distortion or personal views of rights and wrongs. Lena Bartels knew how to pace her class so that the children were neither bored nor bewildered. I sat through 5 classes, one after the other, given by 5 different teachers. By the end of the 5th, I was baffled. All the teachers were excellent. Had I thought about it before I left Earth, I would have concluded that it was inevitable. The screening processes for the L5 colony were so stringent, so exhaustive, that no psychopath, child-hater, or simple incompetent would ever get near the place. I went back to my room and reread some of the children's class reports. After looking carefully at a time sequence of them, I could dispose of Tom's original question about critical mass in the children's group behavior. The disquieting undercurrent of misery had been there for a long time. It was Tom and Theo Hendon's awareness that had triggered suddenly, and after that, naturally, they saw the problem everywhere. I checked a few dates in the history of the colony, then queried a couple of others through the terminal in my room. After that, I went to look for Tom. He wasn't in his office. I tracked him down finally in the high G track, a 4-meter band that ran on air bearings right around the cylinder and rotated faster than the rest. Effective gravity on the track was a little more than half a G. Tom, along with 100 other men and women scattered along the 1,900 meters of rubberized surface, was pounding out his daily quota of 1 complete circuit. He waved to me as he came off the track, jumped to the catch net, and dropped back to the main floor of the exercise section. He looked exhausted. "Any progress yet?" His voice was weary, but I could hear the hope in it. I had ideas, but they were still half-formed and in a pre-verbal state. I would have offered a flat no to most people to avoid discussion before I was ready, but Tom and I had been too close for that. In all our time together, we had only one major disagreement, one that had eventually driven us apart. I felt that my duty lay on Earth, trying to understand and improve the interaction of the teeming billions of a tired planet. As our resources dwindled, that loomed bigger every day as a practical problem. Behaviorists were more important each year, providing the lubricating mechanisms that kept Earth functioning. Tom had disagreed with me, flatly and completely. As soon as the chance arose, he had applied for a position with the colony development team. "This world has had it, Beth," he would say as we walked around the campus. "You can't see it yet, but it's beginning to run down. This was our cradle, but you can't spend your life in a crib. We have to get off Earth. Up where we have Lebensraum, up where power and materials are unlimited. I want to be part of the future, not the custodian of an overpacked museum." We had finally parted, but the sense of instinctive understanding between us was flooding back. Tom would see through a lie of mine as easily as I would read one of his. "I have some ideas," I replied as he toweled his face and arms in the changing rooms of the exercise section. "But I really don't want to talk about them yet. I need more evidence that I'm heading in the right direction." He nodded. "Still a witch, are you?" he said. I smiled. I used to plead supernatural powers back in our college days when I couldn't be bothered to fill in all the steps of some long, tortuous train of reasoning that had preceded an intuitive conclusion about a tough problem or a delicate decision. Most people seemed to be quite happy with a magic answer. Tom was one of the few people who knew how my head really worked, but he had always kept my secret. I was Beth, the Witch of Berkeley. "If you're not worn out," I replied, "I'd like you to take me up to the section near the hub where the children have their recreation area." "Give me another 5 minutes. The high G track is rough going." I looked at his body, pale and skinny, and I thought of the other reason why I didn't care to talk yet. True, I needed more evidence, but equally true, if I were right, there was grief ahead for many of us. This time, we went up to the hub in an elevator, a continuous belt that we grabbed as it came by and rode up the shaft holding onto it. We used an exit point about 30 meters short of the hub itself. I thought the gravity there was 0, but Tom assured me that we were still experiencing a 50th of a G. I weighed about a kilo, Tom a little less. We pulled ourselves along, hand over hand, to a transparent plastic flip in the section wall, about 2 meters square. Tom pulled it aside until we floated ourselves through. Tom easily, I with a good deal more effort and less grace. We had entered a large, open, octahedral section about 30 meters in diameter. The walls were unfinished gray metal, smooth and unmarked except for a large number of yellow metal bosses. Tied to these, and crisscrossing the interior space in a complex, bewildering web, were numerous plastic cables, color-coded and intricately tied at their many crossing points. The ties themselves were focal points for the attachment of hammocks, cabinets, tent-like enclosures, and cloth screens. In the room were about 50 children, singly and in small groups, ranging in age from about 4 to 11. I paused and looked about me. They did all this themselves? I asked. Tom nodded without speaking. The children looked at us warily as we drifted through the section, moving and guiding ourselves with the aid of the web of taut cables. We stopped near a child of about 6 years, painting on a blue, rough-textured plastic sheet. His brushes were small aerosol cylinders, each giving a controllable color spray that ranged in thickness from a fine line to a broad, diffuse swath. His movements as he painted were like an elaborate ballet. As his hand went forward to his canvas, the other thin arm and the long, slender legs moved also. When he looked around at us, I noticed that his arms and legs made small, precise movements at the same time as his head. The effect was very beautiful and totally alien. I saw that he was painting a flowing pattern of lines, converging on a blue center. The common structure of earth paintings into horizontal and vertical elements was lacking completely. "Tom, why do the children move that way?" I asked softly as we left the child and moved on through the maze of cables. "They seem to move, every part of them, all at once." "They do." Tom looked back at the child. His expression was a strange mixture of affection, worry, and sadness. "They learn it when they're very young. They move to keep their heads facing the way they want to by balancing the linear and angular momentum of each part of the body. I've tried to do the same thing, but never been able to master it. Of course, it's really useful up here in 0G. On the outer sections, it doesn't matter so much. They spend so much time up here, they all learn to do it by the time they're 4 years old." "But what about the calcium loss, Tom? If they spend all their time in low G, isn't it uncomfortable for them on the outer rim? Their bones won't take it, will they?" The worry was evident on Tom's face. "That's one of the big problems, Beth. They don't like the outer sections, and they hate to exercise. Every chance they get, they're up here. The first of them are supposed to go down to Earth to complete their education in just 2 more years. They don't have the bone and muscle to take it. Even if they exercise hard now, it will be very hard on them physically. We've tried every argument. They don't argue back, but they don't change their ways. I've tried every persuasion. Their parents, their teachers. Nothing seems to make any difference." We moved on past a group of 4 children, completely absorbed in wrapping a sheet around a group of light struts to form a neat silver enclosure. "See there," said Tom. "That's the same thing on a higher level. Only the older children can do it. They're moving to keep their total momentum right, their bodies in the cube they're making. Don't ask me how they do it. I had seen enough for my theories, but I stayed to watch for aesthetic pleasure. It was like the finest choreography, danced with unearthly skill by a group of fairy folk, delicate-bodied and frail. I knew now what I had to do, but I still had to decide on the right way of doing it. I never did find that right way. Events overtook me. Tom and I had just been to the outer levels, the basement of the colony, and Tom had taken me on a long guided tour of the agricultural sections. All the food that we ate was produced on the colony with almost perfect recycling. The small losses were made up by occasional shipments of raw materials from the lunar surface. Tom estimated the total materials lost from the colony at less than 1% of recycled substance per century, which made it effectively self-sufficient for the foreseeable future, even if Earth cut off support for a second and larger colony. According to Tom, it was the psychological effect of that second colony which was so important. The colonists had to feel that they were in space to stay, that it was their natural and real home. As we returned to the main living quarters, Tom stopped by the message center. He came out looking enormously pleased and excited. "Beth," he said, "why didn't you tell me?" He waved a message slip at me. "This is from Stanford, approving an early start to your sabbatical so you can work in the L5 colony. It says that if you decide to stay here, as you hinted, you would be asked to serve as an extramural professor for as long as you choose." I winced at the pleasure in his voice. This would make it harder yet. "Tom, I don't know if I want to be a colonist here. I do want to spend a year here at least trying to help out, and I think it will take at least that long. That's why I sent my message. I didn't expect such a fast reply, or I'd have talked with you before." "You think you've got the solution to our problem here?" "Not a solution. All I've got is an explanation." He looked relieved. "Hell, don't worry about that, Beth. We've solved every other problem that nature's been able to throw at us up here. If you can tell us the cause of it, we'll find a fix." "I hope you're right. I wish I was that confident." I thought for a few seconds, then mentally shrugged. I had to get it over with. The sooner the better. "Tom, I could say this 100 ways, but none of them are graceful. I'll say it flat out. We don't belong here." He frowned, then laughed uneasily. "Beth, you'll have to say more than that. I don't know what you're trying to tell me." I leaned forward and took his hands, thin and bony, in mine. "Look, you know my thought processes as well as anybody in the world, or out of it. I'll tell you exactly how I got to where I am, and you can tell me if you spot any error in the logic." "All right." He nodded. His face was troubled. "What's the bad news?" "All that I knew when I came up here," I said, "was that the children in the colony were feeling terribly lost and unhappy. That was obvious from the things they were writing in school. Then, even before we got here, I noticed an odd thing. You never called them the children. It was always the spaceborns. And when I got here, I found that the other adult colonists used the same expression." "Well, Beth, they are spaceborn, all of them." "Of course they are, but more than that, they're your children. It's not as if some of the children had been born on Earth and you needed to separate the two types for some reason. They were all born here. Oh, I know there's plenty of love and affection. It's not that. I've seen the teachers working with the children, and I've been impressed by them. But I still find it odd that you would refer to them by a different name. I wondered at first if it were their odd appearance. That was the only explanation that I could think of." I thought back to that appearance and to the aerial ballet of the children's activities, the movement of those delicate, graceful bodies with their smooth skin and scanty hair. When I got here, I went to hear the classes that were being taught. They were excellent. I can't recall hearing anything better on earth. Well presented by teachers who loved the children and their work. I seemed to be stuck. I went back to my room, locked myself in, and reread the school reports and the medical records. Tom, you know the methods I use in my work. I tried to imagine myself inside the head of one of the spaceborns, seeing the world through the child's eyes. It wasn't easy because the cultural references are so different. But when I got it, it was a revelation. Remember, not one of the children here has ever been to Earth, not even to the moon. The colony, is the world, the only real world, the only one that matters. We tell them all about Earth, and the moon too, Beth. They will all visit them in due course. I know you tell them of Earth and moon too much. Tom, all your teaching is done by adults, born and raised on Earth, and it has a single viewpoint, a geocentric one. We can't see the world any other way, but try and see it now as an outsider would. You try to get the children to live in the high-gravity parts of the colony, the ones most like Earth, when all the time they would rather live in zero-G, up near the hub. You plan elaborate exercise programs for them, designed to prevent calcium loss and to keep their muscles strong. They hate it. They don't need those muscles or that strong bone structure. They don't see any point in running on the treadmill. That's the way they see you, in the Red Queen's race and getting nowhere. You even promote standards of beauty based on Earth physique, which must make them all feel like freaks. Do you wonder that they feel alienated from the adults? I paused for breath. Tom was looking unconvinced and a little stubborn. Beth, of course we try and get them to exercise in the higher gravity parts of the colony. Surely you understand why. We don't want them to feel they're on a treadmill, but if they don't build their bodies, they'll never be able to go to Earth at all. It will be closed to them. Sure it will. I held to my purpose and pressed on. Just the way that a trip to Jupiter is closed to you and me. Do we worry about that? Of course not. It isn't home. Tom, this is big news. The colony here is a total success. It can run itself indefinitely. There's only one thing out of place in the colony. Us. We don't belong here. We're clumsy in the low gravity. We need special measures to keep fit, and we never can learn some of the zero-G skills of the space children. As for them, they're miserable and self-destructive for one good reason. People they love are telling them they should be something they are not, something they don't want to be. That gets drummed into them day after day. Do you wonder that they seek happiness away with their own kind, or that they're thoroughly miserable and confused with us? Tom was looking crushed and miserable, his eyes full of self-doubt, but I had to finish. The children could run this colony, Tom, today, with a minimum of advice and assistance from us. This is their home. Earth is an alien place, a remote, unreal ornament in the sky. As for us, we've served our purpose. We were just the transition team, essential to getting the place started. Now we do more harm than good. I was done. I watched in silence as Tom grappled with what I had said, watched as the despair mounted in his face. Beth, if that's it, why can't we see it? His voice was anguished. You are too close to it. You devoted your life to this colony, all of you. It needed somebody from the outside to take a close look. But, Beth, you're saying we'd harm the spaceborns, the children. He corrected himself quickly. We'd never do that. You wouldn't harm them, knowingly. You've harmed them just the same. Don't you see? Somehow to you they aren't real children. You watch them, all of you, waiting for the magic day when they will change to human children and be like you. That won't happen. Ever. They're right for space. Compared to them, We are clumsy, poorly coordinated. We aren't right for life up here. Tom had never been self-deluding, and he had never been a coward. He was fighting to find a flaw in what I said, but on his face was dawning a pained and yearning look, the mask of Moses, learning that he might see but could never live in the promised land. I wondered if I could ever soothe away part of that loss. Beth. He roused himself and looked at me, trying one last hope. If what you say is true, if the children don't need us or want us here, then why do you plan to come and live here yourself? What use will you be as a behavioral specialist if you don't even try and influence the children's attitudes? You'll have no work to do here. I leaned forward and took Tom in my arms, cradling his head on my breast. I'll have work, Tom, more work than I've ever had in my whole life. People here will need help to adjust, tremendous help, but not the children. Everyone but the children. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.